Welcome back, everybody. I'm Samantha Tomlinson.
And I'm Kevin Tracy. Oh, it's so good to be back right now.
Yeah, we took a unintentional break. Things just weren't. It just wasn't really in the cards for us to put one up for February. In the future, obviously, we would try to let people know when we're gone. But
Yeah, well,
regardless,
I was also in the process of some personal stuff and moving, so that was definitely a factor into it. But I'm all situated now, everything's all good, and we are ready to continue on with Movie Reel, with this month being Marvel Month.
so we're talking all Marvel. I mean, there's a process, but yes, we're talking Marvel movies.
Yes,
Let me clarify.
yes, no, everything Marvel is going to be talked about this very episode.
Oh my god, that'd be like hours.
Yeah. I mean, that's not even including like all the TV shows and stuff that's coming out, like WandaVision,
Yeah,
which are you up to date on that?
yes, I am.
Oh boy. Well, we're not going to get into that right now because we're starting at the very beginning with Iron Man.
I love Iron Man. Like, and I love the first Iron Man's 100% the best one.
Agreed.
Second one is the
It's
not
there.
great. It's in terms of sequels. It's not. I don't like. It's fine. Like I'll watch it. I enjoy it, but it's not. It's just really. It's not as good. And the third one, I really like the third one. I know a lot of people don't. I really like it because it's very different between the first and the second one.
I genuinely enjoy that as well.
The second one is just like I remember when I rewatched everything before Endgame, and then I brought up to you, I'm like, Iron Man's villains, and I remember Reed was like from the other room, and he went like, they're not, yeah, they're not very good, or they suck, or something,
Yeah,
and it's
seriously.
like one definitely Obadiah Stane is the better villain, but
It's funny that you bring him up because he wasn't even originally supposed to be the first villain of the movie.
who was?
It was originally supposed to be the Mandarin was supposed to be his first villain for the first movie because the organization that kidnaps him in the movie is called the Ten Rings, and the main guy who like kidnaps him is like messing around with like this like fancy like bedazzled ring, and the Mandarin is known for having like 10 rings that have like like mystical power to them, and the idea was like that was like supposed to be one of his rings. So yeah,
Okay,
the first movie was supposed to be the Mandarin.
I was about to say right there, that could have been the sequel, but I understand why that's the third one. I mean, first of all, it's not because the whole thing with the Mandarin is completely different, but
Yeah, which
like I
I'm still
understand.
kind of bummed about because like that's like one of his like chief villains.
I just at the time I get the frustration. I don't try to argue against it.
Yeah,
But I do kind of think this is either really stupid or kind of brilliant because I definitely did not see this coming. But
Of Jeff Bridges being the bad guy.
oh no, talk about the Mandarin.
Oh, okay.
But Jeff Bridges actually, I think this is a first of all, I think this is a really good, or I think it's a good origin story. I think it's a solid movie. It's kind of funny watching it now. Marvel has just grown so
Oh,
much,
absolutely.
and even Tony Stark is a really good example of excellent character development. He changes so much. He's almost unrecognizable from this, like the first Iron Man to the last Avengers. And
Yeah,
I mean, he's still the same person, but he changed so much. Like, uh, Pepper being Iron Man, getting with Pepper, being a part of the Avengers, like all of this made him so much better.
the difference between this and watching like watching this like the first time when it came out in like 2008 and watching it now like post Endgame, like the difference is night and day with him and the character development between all the characters, especially Rhodey. I feel like he changed the most for obvious reasons. But yeah, Robert Downey Jr. Um, it was just really kind of interesting watching this because I probably haven't seen this in a few years, to be honest. And like watching this, like after like Age of Ultron and Winter Soldier and Civil War and Endgame, it you do see him like grow as a person and try to be a better person, like try to right the wrongs of his past. And in this one, he's kind of on the road to it, but it's like a very rocky start. Um,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
yeah, it does make this like a really solid origin story. And honestly, like I think this is probably like one of the better examples of like an origin story. The only other example that I feel like comes close to is the first Tobey Maguire Spider-Man movie. I feel like that is probably like one of the best examples of like uh, establishing an origin story in a movie. Uh,
That it's been, oh my god, it has been so long since I've seen that.
Same, but from what I remember, it was very methodical. Like first of all, that's a long movie, and I forgot how long this movie was as well.
Yes. This
Uh,
is like 2 hours. This is pretty typical.
yeah, it was like 210 or something like that. But yeah, it was like
Yeah.
it's like I kept watching. It's like wow, I remember this being a lot shorter when I saw this in theaters. Um, but comparing this with like the origin story with like the Tobey Maguire like Sam Raimi Spider-Man movie, um, I feel like they are very similar because they immediately like set it in reality, like in a very firm set like reality, and they establish any like predetermined ground rules. They explain like this is how the world that we live in, and for the most part, it's established in a very like current era, like real world scenario with like a few other like eccentric like elements to it of like like hoverboards and like experimental like military technology and stuff like that, but for the most part like yeah, no, this is like 100% like real and could happen, and I absolutely love that. Whereas like you get like um the Tom Holland Spider-Man, and is like he's being thrown into a world where like magic and
And gods
yeah, and
and
gods and aliens like already exist,
yeah.
so it's like it makes it kind of dulls
It's
down his
different.
it not really dulls down, but it kind of minimizes the impact of his origin story to go from like such a simple and like small town kind of like vibe to it to I was like, all right, I'm an Avenger. It just felt like they were like having him run before he could walk. Whereas in this
Yeah,
one,
yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
if that makes any sense, they're basically like throwing him in the deep end, but in this one is like none of that was established, so that made this movie especially uh impactful for the origin story, I feel like.
For like really quick, like Tom Holland, I think Tom Holland's a really great Spider-Man. He's definitely my
Oh,
favorite one.
absolutely.
I feel like Tobey Maguire, Andrew Garfield, and him. I think they're all great Spider-Man, but they're all very different, just how they approach the
Yeah,
character. But also they're like Tom Holland's in MCU, and like you said, it's very different. And so I remember with Homecoming, that was I'm I'm glad we didn't get his origin story because we've seen it all so many times, but at the same time,
yeah.
part of me wishes we did see it because of this Spider-Man. But I'm glad that you brought up Spider-Man because yes, Spider-Man was my first Spider-Man, and I think Fantastic Four, the one with Chris Evans and like Jessica Alba, those were my
Yeah.
like intro into superhero movies. And Spider-Man I liked, but yeah, they're very long. They're kind of like they're not it's a superhero movie, but it's also kind of like almost like a drama a little.
It really does play out as a drama, yeah. I remember someone like referring to the Sam Raimi Spider-Man trilogy as like the Godfather of superhero movies. Whereas like the first one's great, second one's better, and the third one's kind of shitty.
Yeah. But as for the reason why I was thinking about Spider-Man is because um so Martin Scorsese, like a year plus ago, said something that I know a lot of people were angry at when he said that he thought Marvel movies were
Oh
a lot
yeah,
like he didn't think they were cinema and that they weren't
they're
like
yeah they're not real
and
cinema.
that they're like it's like it feels like you're at an amusement park. And here's my thing. I know what he's saying, obviously I disagree. First of all, are they art films? No, but are they? Some of them are better than others, but they overall are very pretty solid storytelling, pretty solid characters. Um, but I get the amusement park vibe, especially,
Yeah.
and I don't see that as a bad thing necessarily, because sometimes I want to kick back with like Ant-Man and the Wasp is one that I watch all the time. I would rather watch
Oh
that than The
yeah.
Irishman. Like, like it's different types of stories, different audiences, different genres. But the reason like I brought up Spider-Man is because I feel like that like type of, it's superhero, but it's also kind of like a drama. And Iron Man, Iron Man's kind of bordering on, it's partly that drama esque, but it is, I feel like more like it's different. They're shot very similarly, but very different. Whereas Fantastic Four, I remember, was just like fun. It's like a family movie. Whereas this is like,
Yeah.
it's like the first one into the MCU. It's not quite the same as like, what like an MCU movie is today, but it's like the early, like, you can see it in there. Like it hasn't been
You
developed
can
yet.
definitely see, yeah, like you can definitely see like them like establishing a formula that they still for the most part stick with to this day. And I feel like that's part of the reason why like Martin Scorsese kind of says that these movies aren't real cinema, because they do follow a pretty like systematic formula. And like a couple movies kind of strayed from that, like Thor Ragnarok kind of strayed from that.
Yeah.
And a couple other ones, but like for the most part they go like superhero deals with a problem with like the chief bad guy. The bad guy eventually like puts a hero in a situation where they have to have like some like moral dilemma. The superhero has to deal with that moral dilemma and like has self-doubt. They confront the bad guy. The bad guy dies through action either done by the superhero or by the his own incompetence, and the movie's over. And then there's a mid and end credits scene.
I think though, yeah, but I do think that even though the formula is kind of the same, what has changed is the like emotional drama of the characters. Like,
Yeah.
one of the reasons why I love Iron Man 3 is because he's dealing with PTSD from Avengers. He's also
Yeah.
kind of going through this, Iron Man, he started this because he realized my company is not doing the good that I thought it was doing, and he wants to make a change and help people and be better. And he does slowly become a better person from it. And Iron Man 3, he's kind of realizing after Avengers, he says like, I'm just a man in a can. Like if he doesn't have his suit, what is he? And can he still do good? It's also just that they have a power. He doesn't. And so the entire movie is him, it's about Tony as opposed to Iron Man. And I found that just like really interesting. Or like, the last Spider-Man where Peter's like dealing with the loss of Tony and feeling he has to fill like a whole, like there's the emotional
Yeah, a
content has
role.
yeah, the emotional content I think has increased a lot. So
Yeah.
I understand what
I
Scorsese
honestly,
says, but
I feel like it's kind of fluctuated a little bit, and I feel like that's kind of partly because it's like different actors, different directors are working on like these like 20 plus films over the past 10 years, so they're not all going to have the same tone. They're going to be similar, but
mhm.
because they're all telling like they're all part of the same narrative. But for the most part, the emotional tone has fluctuated and shifted between movies. Like the the emotional dynamic between like Tony and like Pepper is not the same in Iron Man 1 as it is in Iron Man 2. It's completely different. It does have the same kind of intensity, I would say, between the two of them, but and it does kind of like continue on with like Iron Man 3 and so on and so forth. But for the most part, like the dynamic between like uh Tony and Pepper in the first movie is completely different for Iron Man 2. So it isn't necessarily the same, but it does kind of keep the same kind of like story going on in terms of like their relationship to kind of keep it like, oh yeah, this is still happening.
I do think though their foundation is great. Um, I
Yes.
but I agree. They're both very like they have that same foundation of like her. She's like one. There's few people that can give him shit. Like she has earned the right. Him and Rhodey have totally earned the right to give him shit. And
Yeah.
I kind of just love this. They have this back and forth. She's basically working for this millionaire playboy man child, and she's literally tossing out girls for him. She literally like she's doing all this stuff for him, yet you can tell like she likes she's still there because she likes it. She likes him. And actually I was thinking, does she like have a crush on him? Because I never really thought about it until I was watching it this time. I'm like, does she have a crush on him throughout the movie? And it only kind of comes to light like when
I
they're
feel like
dancing
there's
and
like a
stuff.
mutual. I feel like there's like a mutual attraction between the two of them, and he was just like kind of didn't really fully acknowledge her because like, oh, she's like my employee, she's a friend, and like I guess more or less friend zoned her, and kind of just like went on about with like his you know crazy like Hugh Hefner esque like lifestyle, which is funny because Stanley's cameo is Hugh Hefner in this movie, which I think is kind of funny how in this one he's Hugh Hefner and in the second one he's Larry King. um,
Oh my
uh,
god! Because I thought the
but
joke was he thinks it's Hugh Hefner, and then he turns around, we see it's Stan Lee. I didn't realize he was playing Hugh
yeah,
Hefner. I thought that was just the
I'm
joke of like he thinks that's who it is.
I fully assumed that was like
Okay, I mean either, yeah,
that was supposed to be Hugh Hefner, and like there's like he's wearing the robe, he's got the pipe, like
yeah,
he's dressed like Hugh Hefner, he's got
yeah.
like the girls around his arms. Like if that's not Hugh Hefner, then Stan is just living his best life right now.
But yeah, I feel like with Pepper, it's there is kind of a friend zone, but I don't. It's again like they do have a work. It's a business relationship.
Yes, it's
Like
platonic. I feel like
and she might have like a little bit of a crush on him, but I don't think she's like pining after him. It was more just there were times where I'm like, I can believe it if she definitely has like she's attracted to him or has a little bit of a crush and he's just not getting the picture. Because but also I was realizing at the beginning of this, I mean, he's clearly very even I'm wondering if he even is aware of it. He's clearly really bored with his life. Like
yeah. Well,
he
I mean,
every
if you have everything given to you
yes.
or within like everything with like a price tag that you can easily afford, I feel like luxuries like that do tend to get like boring.
Mhm.
Um, so I feel like that is kind of like an interesting dynamic that we do see with him.
But it's not like I just it's a great again, this is really great. I love Jon Favreau, who's Happy Hogan, the driver, but he is also the director. He's one of my favorite directors. I think he is very good at telling a story, and he understands how to tell a story. I'm sure there's times where I know, like there was in like Mandalorian, there were a few moments where I was like, I don't really know if this scene was that important, but for the most part, I think he's very good at what he does, and this is
Yeah.
a lot of great showing, not telling. Like he's at this awards thing for him. He doesn't even bother showing up, which I can see that being in his character, but then he just keeps trying to give away the award. He doesn't want it. He has so many. He doesn't care.
He gives it to the guy posing as Caesar at Caesar's palace.
Yeah, and then when he goes, like he's leaving and he's being asked about by the reporter about his company, he's mainly this is mainly like upholding his father's legacy more than anything. And this
Yeah.
scene actually does kind of piss me off, mainly the reporter, because she's grilling him and then just they're having sex. Right. It's like what like
Yep. Yep.
what, do you have any like
I feel like there was
self control?
I feel like there was a scene in between.
Oh, like in
It's like
American
I feel like
Werewolf
there
in
was a scene
London.
in between. Oh yes,
But
it's
that
just
was
me.
way
It's like
worse. That was way worse.
100%. It's like you can stay with me for the day. It's like okay, immediately having shower sex. Like what?
I'm gonna go in the shower.
How?
Okay. Then they're both in the shower. She didn't. I don't recall her inviting you. But I also want to bring up, so the very first scene, it starts in medias res, where he's on already in Afghanistan. He's already shown, we know later he's just done like the Jericho, like presented the Jericho and all that, and
Yeah.
this is when he gets attacked, and you think, oh no, is he gonna die? And then the title. I
Yeah.
love it. I don't want it to change, but I was kind of thinking, how do you think it would have made any major difference if it had been shown in order? Like if the first scene was the awards show, and then we see the full attack, as opposed to attack, then award show recap, and
I,
then
I think I think it would have definitely kind of changed the pace of the movie.
oh, okay, yeah,
Um, because I feel like they needed to establish, like, okay, this is Tony Stark. He is extremely important, and this is how important he is, that to the point where like these soldiers are like, basically getting killed because they're with him. And it also kind of just establishes like how snarky he is in a non kind of professional attitude, because this is not really like a professional like atmosphere, whereas an award show, like, you feel like you kind of have to put on like a face because you're in like the public eye.
hmm
And I feel like that kind of would have not really shown us like who Tony Stark was as
okay, yeah,
as he actually is in like private. We would have seen like public Tony, or like award show Tony, instead of like the real Tony. So I feel like
that's
it,
a
it,
good point.
it was more important to show him in like a more comfortable or natural setting of just like him kind of just like listening to ACDC, having a thing of a glass of scotch, and just like making jokes and asking weird questions with these soldiers. Yeah, it's like, is it true you went 12 for 12 with like the Maxim cover models? Like, yes and no. It's like, Miss March and I had a scheduling conflict, but Christmas was twins. Like, haha.
And I do love the female soldier in the car, and
Yeah.
he doesn't realize she's a woman until she starts talking, and he's like, "Oh my god, you're a woman! I didn't know. Isn't that good though? I saw you as a soldier first." And like, I mean, yes, that is good.
and then
Yeah.
and then immediately it's like, well, now that I know you're a woman, I can't stop staring at you. Is that weird now?
And that joke, I was like, when I heard that, I'm like, it's funny. He's lightening the mood. They're all cracking up. She's laughing. But that's a joke I feel like it's not outdated. I just don't necessarily think it would be in movies today. And he's not hitting on her. He's just kind of like, well, I didn't even like, I didn't
he's
notice, and now I do. Like, I don't.
he's just trying to be charming. He's just really
Yeah,
laying it
absolutely.
on.
I just love that he's got a
Yeah,
glass of
he just
scotch.
has.
I always just forget that there's like a cooler or whatever, or a little thing that pops up after, and he just grabs it, because I'm like, I always forget, and I'm just like, did someone pour that for him? Did he just like bring
Yeah,
it with
yeah,
him? No, he
that's
just
right.
grabbed it. It's just the
Yeah,
whole
because
that,
he
yeah.
because he says like, oh yeah, it's like whenever you buy like an order of like 500,000, or like five, like some like absurdly large order of like the Jericho missiles, it's like these things come with it for free, and then it's like to piece, and then just like goes and it's like, all right, this is the fun V. So you go driving the humdrum V to Rhodey. And I always thought it was funny that like Tony's like, he's been captured for like 3 months, and then when he leaves, and then when like Rhodey like finds him for like rescue, the first thing he says after not seeing his friend for 3 months is like, how was the fun, V? He waited to see his friend for 3 months to tell him a joke.
I mean,
That is
lighten
the
the
best
again.
friend I've ever met.
I mean, I get and same thing, lighten mood, and like, yeah, like cracking joke, like you should have. But I do. But would it have been any different? Wouldn't have Rhodey might have been killed if Tony had been in the car, or how did they know specifically what car he was in? So when we find out later, obviously it's Obadiah, who's the like his partner. He's the one that created the company with Howard Stark, and he's the one that orders the hit on him. And I was thinking about this. Other than power and gain control of the company and just get Tony out of the picture, like I know that's the point, but like, what is his what is his main goal? Like, what is the
He
biggest?
just wanted like I guess he just wanted to like control the company. He was just tired of being in like Tony's shadow. It's not really as fleshed out as it could be in this
Yeah,
movie, which is why I don't like the fact that Jeff Bridges was the main bad guy in this. I felt like it would have been better with the Mandarin or just sticking with the Ten Rings and like maybe him just kind of like dealing on the side as kind of like a side villain and then eventually being a major villain in a sequel or something, and like or just living in general because Jeff Bridges was great in this movie. He
yeah,
is by far one of my favorite villains in the MCU, which it's kind of a shame that's like the common trend is that like the majority of the villains in the MCU die after their first movie, with like a
yeah,
few like outlying examples kind of excluding that rule with like Loki and Thanos and whatnot.
yeah,
Um, but for the most part, like if you're a villain in an MCU movie, that's the only movie you're gonna be in. You might show up in like a flashback or something, a
or like
few
Red Skull.
movie. Yeah, like Red Skull or something, which I don't even think that was the same actor.
No,
I think that was
no,
just
yeah,
yeah. I mean, it was the same character, but
yeah,
like yeah, like for the most part, like you're gonna only show up in like flashback or some like minor scene. You're not gonna have like any drastic or major importance or something
yeah,
later on, which is kind of a shame because a lot of these villains they're not just one shot villains in like the comics and other material. They are recurring villains. Are like, I'll get you next time, Iron Man. Like
yeah,
they have like the Saturday morning like kind of like vibe to them, but like they do like come back. They have like contingencies and other plans. Whereas this one's like, I'm gonna kill you because I want to be rich. Damn, I missed and I'm
it,
dead. Well,
yeah.
that was it. You don't have anything,
It just
nothing
it
else.
just it does kind of bother me because yeah, it's not like you said, it's not very I feel like his reasoning, yeah, I can infer a bunch of it, but it's not crystal clear what again, I know what why, but also no I don't. Like I understand how a little bit, but it's not as clear as it could be. And if he wanted just Tony out of the picture, there has to be I'm like, is Tony so well secured that he couldn't do this, that this is how he had to do it? And how does he have the connections with these guys?
Because he sells them weapons.
Okay. Obvious. I guess I
Yeah.
was okay.
Um, but I also feel like they kind of had to do it in this way of like him not outwardly like expressing it or like delivering like what his like full intentions were, because then it would come across as like, oh, he's just monologuing or something like that,
Yeah, yeah, and yeah.
and just deal with like that crazy weird trope,
I did because I think in like the very end he's like slightly monologuing, but it's still like it's kind of already what you assume what he's saying.
Yeah,
It's nothing
yeah, it's
nothing
already what is.
yeah. Um
Yeah, it's not something that we haven't like figured out on our own or by his own actions.
and the very first time I watched this movie, I didn't know he was a bad guy. Like I was surprised when he was the bad guy. And looking back, rewatching it again, I'm like, it's very obvious he's the bad guy. Um Specifically, first of all, it just like out of I mean, we think okay, after his especially after his stint in the when he goes back to like when he goes to the village and like saves the village, like after especially after that, like okay, it's definitely Obi, but particularly the scene where right before it's revealed, we see him watching the TV and how Tony just saved this village and he's wearing like an evil villain robe in like a dark library, and I'm like, how did I not catch on when I first saw this? It's very clear. But yeah, I agree. I really like Jeff Bridges, and I was kind of sad that he, you know, his character died and we didn't get to see more of him. But also that this is his because sometimes there's certain times where it's like being in a Marvel movie also like 10 years ago, I don't think is quite the same as being in one today because if
Oh no, absolutely
like
not.
Chris Evans was Johnny Storm and now I mean he's Captain America. And Whereas like there's times where I'm like, don't you think like you've just been put in this Donald Glover in Homecoming, and he is a person, a very viable villain in the comics, right? And he was in like his character, I don't remember the name, but he was, is it Aaron in the Spider-Man?
Which character again?
Donald Glover's character in Homecoming. And he was
Oh
the
yes,
uncle to
yeah,
the
Prowler.
I hope like we see him because Donald Glover's super talented, and I would love to see him get like more screen time in a Marvel movie. But if that's like the only like we'll ever see of him, it's like no, like that was such a, I mean, it was a great part and he did it great, but it was small, and like I want to see more, which I've noticed a couple times with some people. But back to
yeah, no, and yeah, he even drops like is like, oh yeah, like my nephew like lives in this neighborhood. It's like, oh, he's talking about Miles.
Yeah.
Like everyone's like, wait, I know that character. It's like, oh, they call him the Prowler. It's like, oh, it is. Oh, he's talking about his nephew. Like everyone just like who, because I think that came out before Into the Spider-Verse.
I think yeah. It's kind of like in I mean different, but kind of like in Mandalorian when Ahsoka says, I've like, she's not going to train Baby Yoda. She's like, I've seen what happens to a fully grown Jedi who has an attachment, and I'm like, oh, is it that? Like, we're all like, oh, we know what you're talking about. That same little like tidbit of, if you're a nerd, you'll get it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Which I really like about it, but it was kind of funny because like this came out, I was pretty young, so like my knowledge
2008,
about
yeah.
like a lot of like so like my knowledge of a lot of like superhero movies and stuff like that I didn't really have a lot. It was mostly just the
Movies.
like 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 the mostly like the movies. I didn't really like read the comics that much because a lot of the ones that I had like, or like more specifically my dad had, were like more or less like collector's issues. Like he had like my dad straight up has like a Iron Man issue 1 #1.
Whoa, that's really cool.
Yeah, it's not in the best shape, but still.
He has it, yeah.
And yeah, I have it in like a box like right in front of me right now. And it's really interesting. But yeah, like my knowledge of like Iron Man and all of that I didn't really have a lot, so I thought it was kind of a smart move for Marvel to kind of start on a character that is well known in like name recognition, but not that many people for like a general audience knows like his origin story or anything about it. So they kind of had a clean slate to go with. Whereas if they just went with like Spider-Man or Captain America, like everyone knows those characters. Everyone kind of has like a general idea of how that story plays out, especially Spider-Man, since the Tobey Maguire movies were already a thing. So I felt like Iron Man was a really solid opening movie to get the ball rolling for the MCU because because like I said, like not that many people knew everything about it, so they had a lot more room to kind of like leave it for interpretation and kind of explore with this character and get people interested with a very charming Robert Downey Jr.
And Jon Favreau, he had even he had talked about how like when this all was happening, like it wasn't obviously the pressure of like what like the Russo brothers were doing and all that, because the MCU wasn't as relevant. I mean, yes, this is MCU, but it wasn't like as like down our throats about it yet. That comes later. And he was saying though, but also I think like people were just excited to see Robert again, because Robert Downey Jr., I think he was doing stuff in like in kind of the early 2000s, but I think in like late 90s, early 2000s was when he was dealing with his substance abuse and all that stuff. So
yeah, I honestly I think the first movie that I saw him in that I can distinctly remember was the Shaggy Dog remake that Disney did.
Oh my god,
Tim Allen, because he's the bad guy in it.
Oh my god, I was about to say I think this was my first, but Yeah, I always forget that he's in that. Holy shit.
which I can't remember if that came out before or
I think
after
that came out
this, but I
before.
do.
That came out before because I remember I
Yeah,
was watching
2006.
it when I was in like fourth, going into fifth grade or something, and uh, yeah, and Iron Man was a couple years later. That's
Yeah, that
crazy.
was that came out in 2006. That came out 2 years prior.
That's hilarious because I was thinking, yeah, he was doing a couple things before this. He did like Kiss Kiss Bang Bang, Zodiac, which is really great, and I forgot all about
Yeah,
Trinity
that
Dawn.
is a great
That
one.
it's I mean, we definitely need to do a Zodiac one because it's not just
Yeah.
yeah, but like it's a very different kind of crime movie. And when I first watched it, I didn't know anything about I knew the Zodiac killer, but I didn't really know that much about it. But actually, I
Yeah.
went through this after Endgame in my morning period. I watched Sherlock Holmes, and then the second Sherlock Holmes. Then I tried watching a little bit of Sherlock with Benedict Cumberbatch, and then I started watching Zodiac. I just went down this weird path of it started off morning
That is quite the rabbit hole.
of it was morning Tony, and then it went to and then it went to just crime and mystery. But yeah, I mean, Robert Downey Jr. himself, he's very I mean, he's charismatic, he's fun, he's funny, he's really talented. I part of me like was looking forward, not I didn't, I didn't want him to die in Endgame, but part of me was thinking like when all this ends, I do want to see him do other things because he did other things, then was mostly doing Iron Man, and like that, yeah, like almost everything he was doing was related to Marvel. So I would kind of he's starting to kind of do other things now, uh, which is great for us.
Yeah,
But
yeah. I
yeah,
mean, I love him in like comedic roles, like him in Tropic Thunder is like him playing in Tropic Thunder is hilarious. Although it is kind of odd now because
yeah.
he's pretty much in blackface the entire movie, so that does kind of leave kind of like, oh, this movie has not aged well when you think about it.
Well,
Although that
yeah,
movie is still really funny, so it's like how I have mixed feelings about this movie.
that came, I think, like just around or just like before or after. It was around the same time. They're both 2008. Um, but yeah, let's back to Iron Man. Um,
Oh, I guess.
what what is your favorite? Do you have a favorite scene, or I guess I mean at least one? I'm assuming you have a couple, but what's your favorite
uh,
scene?
I, I, I mean, I kind of really like they had like callback scenes in the movie where it's like when he first did like his test flight in like the Mark II with like the silver looking suit,
Hmm.
and he dealt with like the ice problem and like his whole suit like froze over, and then when he fought Obadiah Stane in his Ironmonger suit, um and he dealt with like the ice problem as well. It's like, oh cool, it's like, hey, he learned from his mistakes and he's getting better. He actually is growing as like both a person and a hero, because we kind of did see some like personal growth with like him going out of his way to like make sure like Pepper is safe.
Oh yeah,
um and it was just kind of cool seeing how he did grow in like this like kind of like subtle kind of joking way. I thought that was pretty cool, and also I just really liked the scene with like him in the Humvee with the soldiers and
yeah.
just like laughing it up, like getting them to like relax, and it's like, are you guys like not allowed to talk? Seriously, I feel like you guys are gonna snuff me any minute. It's like, come on, like crack a joke, smile. What about you?
I think for me, I really love the scene where he goes to the village and then he's like flying him like versus like the Air Force essentially, and him
Yes.
on the phone with Rhodey, who's like, and he's like, did you send any equipment there? No, no, nothing. And then
No, we're
like I
good.
love I love the it's a lot of rising action. I love the suspense. I just I love the performances of like everybody. But also just the back and forth between like Rhodes and Tony. So when Rhodes calls him, he says like he's like, Tony, what? Hello, like he's trying to be a dick, and then later when he calls Rhodey back, he's like, Rhodey's just like, hello, like being a dick right back to him.
It's like it's hi, it's me. It's like, yeah, I know it's you. You can't play this. Like, no, it's me. It's literally me. It's a suit. I'm in a suit. Just like call them off, please.
I love the scene. I love the dialogue. I love everything about it. It's a very fun and also intense scene. Like just yeah. I also
Yeah, because like
really
those are like American fighters. Just like I can't shoot back at them.
so yeah, and then like he I love that you owe me a plane. It's like, well, technically he hit me. It's like, yes,
It's like,
argue
well,
with that. Yeah, use that argument in court.
I mean, he's rich enough to avoid any problems. But it was also really funny. It's like, well, what do I tell the people about the plane missing? It's like, just training exercise. That's usual BS, right? It's like it's not that simple. 2 seconds later, an unfortunate training exercise and results in losing the F-22 Raptor. I'm glad to report the pilot did survive, and no, we did not. We were not involved in the incident in the village. It was just really
Mhm.
funny how quickly he like turned it. Is like I have no other option but to deal with this.
We also well, we got to talk about the obvious the thing in this movie. So I love Rhodes. I think he's what's actually really quick. What's Rhodes' first name? He's only called Rhodey.
Uh,
So
James
James.
Rhodes, I
Okay, I
believe.
almost thinking Tim. I'm like, no, it's not Tim. It's not Tim.
No.
Like, who's Tim Rhodes?
Ah, yes, Timmy Rhodey.
Little Timmy Rhodes. But I love Rhodey. I think they're throughout the character throughout the series, him and Tony are great, and he really evolves and everything. But yes, it's Terrence Howard in this movie. It's Don Cheadle in pretty much every other Marvel project after. And
Yeah.
how first of all, before I did a little bit of research on why he wasn't in the next one, but how do you like this? How do you like Terrence Howard Rhodes as compared to Don Cheadle? Because I feel like the root of the character is the same and their approach, but they obviously do have different approaches because they are
Yeah.
different actors.
I feel like Terrence Howard in this movie, at least, he kind of had a little bit more um stoicism. He was a lot more stoic. He was a lot more like grounded in reality. He had a lot more authority. It felt like where like he's actually like interacting with like like all these like military personnel. He's like in the control room. He's like, hey, it's a training exercise. Like, don't worry about it. Don't make any calls. And everyone like immediately listens to him because he's a colonel. He's a colonel in the United States military. Whereas Don Cheadle and like the previous installments, we don't really see any like interactions like that so much. Like we get like one interaction in Iron Man 2 where he like has the Mark II suit and he's like takes it to the Air Force base and they like modify and weaponize it to turn it into a war machine. But for the most part, Don Cheadle I feel like is more of the comedic of the two with between him and Terrence Howard,
Yes.
which I felt like was a good step in the right direction because they did definitely kind of build up a lot more comedic chops in the previous in the movies later on in the next few phases and few movies. Um, but I felt like if they stuck with Terrence Howard, it kind of would have kept it grounded in a little bit more drama because I'm having a hard time picturing Terrence Howard being like in Civil War. It's like, okay, Tiny Guy's big now. I have a hard time picturing Terrence Howard saying that. Whereas Don Cheadle's like, yeah, no, I can totally picture him saying that. That's a funny line. He's a funny guy. Terrence Howard is a lot more serious, and I don't think would have really played well with like the chemistry with like a lot of like the other characters like Paul Rudd or Chris Evans. It would have all been like serious or exposition lines rather than funny kind of buddy cop kind of situations.
Yeah, and I definitely agree with that. The grounded in reality, because I was thinking about this, and there were these two scenes that I felt like almost I could be interpreting. I very well might be interpreting it wrong, but they seem to like contradict each other. So when Tony comes back, he calls for a press conference and says that he's shutting down the weapons like like the weapons department,
Yeah.
and everyone's shocked. Rhodey's the only one that's just like kind of looks down, like. And I was thinking about this, like he's not very surprised. Like, he's surprised, but he's not very surprised because out of everyone, he's seen combat. He's seen, yeah, these weapons, like they have done a lot of good, but they've also done bad. He's probably way more aware of what is going on than anybody else. So I kind of thought it was a moment of like, I mean, he's surprised just like everybody, but he also can understand, like, after what everything he's been through, it does make sense that he doesn't want to keep up with, he doesn't want the company to keep going in the direction that they're
Yeah.
going. But then later, when Tony says, like, he goes to the base and he's talking to him, he says, like, I'm working something. It's not with my company. It's something else. And he was basically like, no, you need to kind of get back to Earth, like, and like take like rest and whatever. He kind of was like, he was talking him out of it, like, no, like, it's a mistake to
I kind of,
change. Do you know what I mean? Like, those
yeah.
two scenes, I feel like unless I'm wrong about the first scene, which I could be, I felt like they were contradicting each other.
Yeah, I felt like
So I'm
it
like, what
was,
is his?
yeah, I felt like there was a lot of like back and forth with Terrence Howard's character in terms of that. Like he made it seem like um he wanted what was best for his friend, but I felt like he was trying to do what he thought was best, was like Tony, who has been in captivity for 3 months, and at this point he hasn't really disclosed what happened to him, because like like Phil Coulson like shows up and is like, "Yay, Phil Coulson's in this movie." Miss that guy. He
Oh,
uh like for as far as I know, like he never fully like gives like the full picture of what happened to him in there, other than the fact that I have shrapnel on my chest and I have this thing in my chest that is a magnet that prevents me from dying. Basically, that seems to be like the
yeah,
only main thing that he has disclosed to, like, for the most part, like his like close friends and family, and like Obadiah Stane, like Pepper, Rhodes, Happy, and Obadiah. Like those are like the only four people I think who know about that, like within intimate details. Um, but I felt like Rhodey was trying to justify um his actions and trying to be supportive during the press conference, but when he's like saying like, "Hey, I want to do like this and this. I want you to be a part of like the secret project that I'm working on." It's like, "Hey, no, dude, like you need to slow down. You've been in captivity for 3 months. Rest, relax. You're making crazy decisions when you might not be fully there." Like, because like you said, he's seen combat. We don't know if like Tony's suffering like from PTSD or something like that, and could be making wildly drastic decisions that could like permanently like change his situation. It could bankrupt him. It could ruin his name. It could do any number of things. And I felt like he was trying to do what he could to kind of be the firm hand to like kind of push him into reality, which is why I feel like Terrence Howard is a lot more serious in this rather than Don Cheadle. So like that push and pull between like serious and comedy, I felt like works well for Terrence Howard rather than Don Cheadle.
yeah, and okay, and yeah, I felt like T- Terrence Howard, yeah, definitely is more serious, and I can see Don Cheadle in this movie. I can't. It is hard to visualize Terrence Howard in the other movies, but I'm sure it would have worked out and been fine. Like, if he was still in them. I was doing a little bit of research, and I guess the reason why he wasn't in the next movie was because his paycheck was so much smaller, like
Yeah,
so
I
much
heard that as
smaller,
well. It was
and
like he was only
and
getting like 10% of what he
one
made in the first movie
eighth
or something
of,
like that.
yeah. And he said that, I think it was like, and I guess Robert Downey Jr. got a little bit more, but also, and then when he tried to like talk to him about it, I guess, but I feel like the bigger issue really is, I get why he has issues with Robert, because um Marvel apparently, and again, this is, there it might be more to it, we don't know, but they're apparently, Marvel like gave him such a decrease because they said like, we think this movie would be, it'll be a success with or without you, which is the most bullshit thing ever. It's like, are you kidding? That's not, you pay someone to do a job. If you don't want them to do the job, then you don't like bring, like, why even, so I understand why, like, like that's bullshit. And then when I guess he tried to like, I guess he helped Robert get the job, and when he tried to like approach him or talk to him about it, like, it just, they weren't able to connect, or they didn't come up, so it was more like he wasn't backing him up. So I understand why he has issues with Robert Downey Jr., but I feel like Marvel seems to be the one that screwed up more, like they both screwed up, but Marvel's more. But again, this is just what I found. There's might be more to it than that.
Yeah,
I think that's in a nutshell what he
I'm
said.
sure there's more of a picture that we're not seeing, but yeah, for the most part, like I felt like it kind of boiled down to he wasn't being paid nearly enough as what he deserved.
And at first I thought, like, when I first saw that it was a paycheck issue, was like the surface level of it. At first I thought, like, I mean, it makes sense why Robert Downey Jr. would get more. He is the main character. He's the main star of this movie. But to get such a drastic decrease, that is bullshit, and that makes sense why he didn't want to move forward. So I I I understand. Like, I don't think he's being ridiculous about it.
Yeah, I don't think so either. But it is kind of a shame that you know they kind of ditched him when they did, because that's a crappy reason to get rid of someone. Um, but it's also kind of funny because like Phase One kind of dealt with a few instances like that. There was like Terrence Howard, and then there was Edward Norton as the Incredible Hulk, and then they changed that to Mark Ruffalo. Um, it was just kind of funny how like Phase One was just kind of like the period where they kind of like phased people out that either weren't with the program or weren't like their ideal casting choice. But it was just kind of funny how it, Phase One is now completely different than the rest because of the various casting changes that have taken place over the years.
It also just got so much, like, this, everything about like each phase just got more and more complicated. Like, it's just,
It really
it's
did.
so interesting because this is like a franchise of multiple different, it's like a bunch of franchises within this large franchise, and they all come together. Like, there's very few things like that.
I feel like the only thing that comes close are the like some of the James Bond movies, but even not all of those are connected, and some of them are very loosely connected.
Mhm.
And then there's like a handful of like Godzilla movies over the years are like either loosely connected or like some of them are like direct sequels to each other, but even then they're not as widespread and connected as the MCU movies. And I'm only saying that because those are like arguably like the only other two movie franchises that are as large or as influential as MCU, with like Godzilla being like 75 years starting in like 1954, and James Bond starting like had like the second highest number of like movies in a franchise, like only being beaten by Godzilla by like two at the time, when I last checked. I think it's drastically different now with like like the MonsterVerse and all of that
Yeah.
happening.
Um, Actually, I want to backtrack a little bit because when you brought this up,
Yeah.
I was thinking about this in the movie. He's in captivity for 3 months. It It
Yes.
did not seem like 3 months. It seemed like maybe 2 weeks at the most. Based on what we're seeing, it does not seem like he was in
Well,
captivity a long time. But then again, we don't know how long he was building, and we don't know how long he was probably like in and out of conscious. He was like awake for part of his surgery. So like we don't know how long that took. We don't know how long. I mean, I get understand like I can accept that it's 3 months. It's just there's a lot of we don't know how long all these things took that went in like 3 months. I mean, I thought that was like a week.
yeah, I mean, there's definitely like like a couple like montages of like like him like ordering parts like around and like how long he was like under for surgery. So it's like I felt like there was enough happening that to make it feel like there was enough of a passage of time to make 3 months believable. Like I didn't feel like that was like an outrageous amount of time. It's like Tony, you've been gone for 10 years. Like it didn't seem like outrageous to me. It was like you've been
Yeah,
gone 3 months. Like okay, yeah, like that was like 30 minutes of the movie. Yeah, sure, 3 months. That's fine. I can
yeah,
believe that.
yeah. And I was thinking about this when he gets out of captivity and he arrives back home and they're in the car and uh Happy's like, where are we going? And Pepper's like, take us to the hospital. He's like, no, we're not going to the hospital. And they have that like their classic Pepper and Tony banter, and him saying like, no, there's two things I want to do. First, I want a cheeseburger, and of course they make reference to that in Endgame, where after his funeral,
Yeah.
when his daughter says she wants a cheeseburger, and Happy you can see is just like we're all just like reference to
It's like
beginning.
it's like I love you 3000 and just immediately like everyone just started crying.
I was mainly one of the reasons why I was definitely crying when he died, but I think one of the reasons why I was crying was
Oh,
because
100%.
was when in Infinity War when he first like when it all starts and he meets Doctor Strange and Wong and he realizes like Wong does something and he realizes how badass Wong is. He's like, Wong, you're invited to my wedding. And then the next time we see Wong is Final Battle and his funeral. And so it was this kind of weird like I that's
It's like
really what
Wong didn't get to see the wedding.
well that was mainly because he was he disappeared. Uh but so
Still.
yeah. Oh yeah. Uh I feel like there was something else I wanted to bring. Oh, wait. There's something else I wanted to bring up, and I can't. And I don't remember what it was. It was right there. I was just thinking about it because well, okay. So the hang on, just hang on. Do you have an opinion? I'm thinking I've lost my train of thought.
um um what was your opinion on like the Ten Rings, like the organization like that kidnaps him in the beginning, and like Jensen and all that? Like we talked about like Jeff Bridges and like him being like the main bad guy, but like he was only like a bad guy for like maybe like the last hour of the movie, whereas like these guys were like the main antagonistic force that he fights throughout the movie.
I felt like they were very meh because we don't really know anything about them. Um, they're
Yeah.
kind of like they're like I mean they're terrorists causing chaos. Like there's nothing remotely um there's nothing very unique about them or they're just kind of like yes, they kidnap Tony and then that's who Tony is of course going to focus on. I was just very whatever about them. The main one that you know when they're because they're watching Tony and what's his name? I can never remember his name.
Jensen.
Yeah, when they're watching them work and they're like, this does not look like at all like the plans. And he's kind of like, I think, we're I'm giving him till like tomorrow because they're clearly he thinks they're doing something else. Oh, I remember what I was thinking. Anyway, we'll get there. But he of course, okay, so he's the like ringleader. He's the one in charge. Yet we don't meet him until later. Fine, but I don't know. I think it's kind of that in terms of villains, this is a very interesting movie villain wise because the who we think are the villains are kind of bland, whereas the one
Yeah,
that we are being given the most info, I mean, not given a ton, but the one that we spent the most time with is Obi, and then we realize he's the bad guy. So I'm very
yeah.
whatever about them. I'm very indifferent.
And and I felt like they were kind of just made generic to be kind of like,
Yeah,
like generic Middle Eastern terrorist organization, because that kind of reflected like our current, like at the time, like that was what we were fighting in like the Middle East, was just like the Taliban and all of that, because like that was still like a very fresh
yeah,
I felt like that was like that's like a common trend with like movies like back in the 80s. Like every like foreign enemy was a vaguely
yeah,
Russian archetype type villain, and then kind of after like post 9/11, everyone it shifted from like a Cold War stance to like every villain was like a Taliban type substitute, and it kind of carried on a little bit like going forward with like like the fake Mandarin in Iron Man 3, but they've since kind of stuck to the more like fantastical enemies, and kind of ditched a more realistic enemy of like
yeah,
like a terrorist organization. But I felt like they were kind of there to kind of I guess kind of make it seem more real than than it than it was, by having a very realistic enemy. It's like this is something that is going on right now, and it definitely kind of has a little bit more depth when it's like we can kind of understand what's going on because this is what we're fighting right now, if that makes any sense.
yeah. And also, like for example, like Loki is a character that he's versatile enough that we understand kind of where his anger comes from and where his like the like root of why he is a I mean villain but on and off villain really. Like we
Yeah,
can also kind of we can relate to him, like he like the villains. And whereas these, yeah, they're very it is definitely like generic terrorists that were not really meant to think much beyond that. um I I actually like this also kind of goes to I was thinking about this like Iron Man's villains, they're very they're only really applicable to him. Like for example,
absolutely.
like Captain America, things that he deals with like Winter Soldier and Civil War affect the MCU and affects the all of the Avengers, whether it's in a large way or not. And like Thor, it makes it there's shifts that carry over. It doesn't quite necessarily affect everybody like all the Avengers, but it affects like the world. Whereas Tony's just affect him and they affect his world and the
Because
bubble of
yeah,
his world. And
yeah,
because I mean like and it's and part of that is just obviously okay, but the like
he's
sure,
it,
but
it's also kind of funny that like the majority of his villains are his villains because he was an asshole at one point or another to one or if not all of them, which is just kind of funny because I remember someone saying that it's like the bad guy for Iron Man 3 is like, this is literally just Syndrome's plan. There's no difference between this and Syndrome's plan. It's like no wait, oh crap, you're right. It is literally Syndrome's plan of trying to make himself look like the hero by making a fake villain that he would defeat.
I said kind of the same thing about Killmonger, like in terms of like giving everybody weapons. He's also
Yeah.
syndroming it a little bit, but yeah, like oh
It's
god,
like
he is
when
syndrome.
everyone's super. Yeah, when everyone's super, no one will be.
I
Which
there was
damn, that's a
that
solid.
is
That's solid.
that's a very I mean Incredibles is just deemed as like it that's an underrated superhero movie like because it's more deemed as it's The Incredibles, it's a Disney, it's a Pixar film, but that's a really solid superhero like story. Um, but anyway, I was there was a podcast I was listening to, and they were talking about Bloodshot, and Guy Pearce is the bad guy in it, which is revealed in the trailer. And they made the point,
Yeah, isn't that the
yeah,
Vin Diesel movie?
and they were talking about
Yeah.
how like he always seems to be playing like bad guy millionaire of tech company or something like that, like Guy Pearce, like that's not like, and like yeah, Iron Man, like he is this it was pretty much kind of the same not same like circumstances, but same kind of like background of the character. um but yeah, anyway, see, this is what I was thinking of earlier, and I was thinking about this in the movie. So the scene where Tony asks Pepper to go over to go to the like office,
His
the company.
company.
I was gonna say the office. I'm like, would you say it's an office? Like, go to the go to Stark Industries.
I mean, yeah. Go to my office and hack the mainframe as the crazy hacker woman that I know you are.
Because because he knows obviously they're now like
They're
roughing him
dealing under the
out,
table.
and they are, yeah, like they're selling weapons that they're not, like, he wants to know what's going on. And she finds out, oh, it's all Obadiah, and we know by this point that it's him. But does he, and the first thing he does, because she's at the computer, he's kind of making small talk, and he's talking in that way of, and based on the music, it's very like, obviously,
It's like, oh, something's about to go down.
yeah. But the first thing he does when she leaves is he goes to the computer, and like what was she doing, and sees like, okay, she has the files. Did he know that's what she was doing, or he thought that's what she was doing, and he was just like trying to make small talk, like whatever, like just because he seems very like, the second she leaves, he's like jumps into action.
He immediately checks the computer, and then he realizes, like, oh, she stole it, and then he just doesn't. It's like, you're not going to follow up on that or anything. That very incriminating evidence of you planning a hit. You have like the video on your computer. It's like, you're not gonna follow up on that. It's like, nope, okay, bye. Go look in jail.
So it's because like, are you talking about like, is he gonna follow up on that, or her? What do you mean?
Yeah. It's like he gonna follow up on that because like she has the files that like you're gonna go to jail if that gets out. You do realize that, right? And just immediately just doesn't he doesn't follow up on her. He literally sees her like walk up to Coulson and it's like, yeah, no, let's go. We're going to your office. It's like, you're not. I mean, I don't know what you could do, but I mean, you could do something.
Well, he does. He goes to, this is my other favorite part. He goes to Tony's house and does the temporary paralysis and takes the arc reactor because he can't. He's asking all his engineers to, like, do the same thing, make the arc reactor and make it smaller, and they can't. Which I also love that scene, and I love he like screams like, Tony Stark built this in a cave with a box of scraps. And he's like, well, I'm not Tony Stark. Because he keeps saying how it's impossible. The technology doesn't exist, yet Tony was able to do it. So that's the next scene. Because I think that's when he's realizing he, yeah, she's with Coulson. There's people around. He can't, other than like try to be sly and like forcibly take her, there isn't really much he can do. So he tries to go see, okay, what's going on with my suit and mini arc reactor. That's a dead end. So he's gonna go to Tony and take it
and steal it.
What he didn't count on was that this wasn't his only one. But I love the scene, and
that Tony Stark has a heart.
I love that scene, and I love the cinematography in that is really great. It's like the camera's kind of tilted. Like, so Tony's laying on the couch and just staring up, and Obi's leaning over him, and the camera's like slightly. It looks great. Like I love it. Like I love it just because it's so like it's like the equivalent of the
menacing.
Yes, it's like the equivalent of like tying someone up. I guess this is the equivalent of monologuing. Yeah. And kind of.
Oh yeah, no. This is the closest that you're ever gonna get to a monologue from Jeff Bridges.
But it's a good monologue. I love it.
It is. It's like, I was worried we were gonna kill the golden goose when I sent out that hit on you, but you had one last egg to give. It's like, damn, that's a solid line. I want to hate you right now, but that's just good.
And I love, it's weird. I love scenes where like the hero, like even like when like hero is injured, like hero can't protect, the protector can't do their job. Like, and he's just like, he can just only listen. He's just staring up at him, and then like when he says like, I'm sorry, wish she didn't involve Pepper. I would have preferred that she live. And just his eyes widen and he still can't do anything. It's kind of one of my favorite scenes in Homecoming is when they're driving to the dance and he realizes that his girlfriend's dad is the Vulture, and he's trying like to keep his cool.
And the dad realizes like, wait, this kid's Spider-Man.
But it's not even just it's like the girl's like, wait, you were at my party, but then you left. And then during her party, that's when I was doing with Spider-Man. And then DC, like, he's just putting the pieces together and he can't cover his ass. Like, it's that same, like, there's just nothing to do but just let the cars.
It's like down. just try to try to deny
and
it.
I just love the scene in Iron Man because it's also just like he does temporary paralyze one of the terrorists, but like, and that's more just like the like, oh, okay, like it's not, we don't care that much about this character, but for Tony, obviously we're realizing what we know now so much and what actually happened, and it's unexpected, and it happens like, again, it's great cinematography. He's on the phone with Pepper, he doesn't even say anything, and then he is getting paralyzed and the camera's like panning and you see like it's great. Like it's between that scene and the training, the flight training scene is my favorite.
That I love that in his like dynamic with like his like robot that he built like forever ago. It's like I swear to God, if you point that thing one more time at me, I'm donating you to City College. It's like, that is just hilarious.
His robots are so advanced. They're basically like droids. Like they have feelings, and I love how there's one that I guess is like the shittiest of all of them, and he's always given a hard time. He could fix it. He leaves it this way. And then that's the one that hands him the heart when he's like struggling to reach it. We didn't talk about Jarvis. We should talk about Jarvis before we end, because Jarvis obviously has definitely changed throughout the course of MCU. But
I mean, I don't think so. I don't think of a single thing that changed with him. He got replaced with Friday, and that was the end of that.
No one cares about Friday. She's fine. Like, she's fine, but no.
It's a day.
Jarvis gave him. Jarvis is like Rhodey or Pepper, or he gives him shit like anyone else. Jarvis, are you from Jonah and the Whale? I wouldn't really use that as like, what is he? He says something like, what are you doing, Tony? Like he gives him him as much shit as everybody.
It's like when he like asked for the paint job, it's like, let's get that little like gold like titanium alloy plating. It's like, at once, it's like, a little too grandiose. It's like, you're right, sir. What was I thinking? You're usually much more subtle. That is just that's great.
It's his Alfred, essentially, like in the snarkiness.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Well,
in the comics. In the comics, like Alfred or Jarvis actually is his butler. Like there wasn't really like that AI.
Really,
that was like, like that was changed like later iterations of Iron Man. And like I mean, like another example is that Nick Fury, it was like originally like a white guy, and then they changed that to later, it's like he's black now, and then they had Sam Jackson play that character.
Even if it never changed from a white guy, I don't like it wouldn't matter. Like, he's perfect. Like, Sam perfect. Like, there's no one that does a better Nick
Sam
Fury.
Jackson all the way.
it's one of those roles
It's like
where you know when there's like those roles that like this performance and this character is so good that I can't imagine anybody doing a better job. That's who what Samuel Jackson Nick Fury is. Like I've heard that like how Nick Fury's
I
white.
100% agree.
I've heard that like Nick Fury's white in the comics and it's more like, like that's funny, but no one cares because
Yeah,
it's
I mean
irrelevant.
there's like there's like yeah, like there's a lot of difference in like the comics that have changed over the years. Like there was like the whole um Captain America being a Hydra double agent.
What?
There was
I never heard that one.
there was like Lady
Well,
Thor.
that they're doing that one.
That
Love and
well,
Thunder.
yeah, I mean
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. There was a oh god, there was another one, and I'm drawing a blank. But yeah, like every once in a while, it seems like the comics just kind of like release something that's like widely controversial or kind of hated or discriminated against to the point where it's like this will drum up sales because like people want to read this so they know what to like why they should hate it. They do that in a way to kind of like drum up enough sales to like justify writing something this outlandish or out there. Like the whole like original like one of like the origins for like Quicksilver and Scarlet Witch, which if you've seen WandaVision, you know like they're siblings and all that. But yeah, they've had a weird relationship in the comics that I don't want to get into for our podcast
Oh.
for reasons.
Um. Oh. Oh. Like now I'm okay. Let's just
Yeah,
what?
no, no, yeah, no.
So,
So yeah, on that note, I'm Kevin
wait.
Tracy.
Wait. Oh, gross. um. Um. But I know the only I mean not major. I know like Bucky in Captain America. I know Bucky was originally like brought in as like it was like a Robin s kind of character.
Yeah, it was like it's like his like young ward kind of thing. It was like a teenage like character.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, there's like a lot of like weird changes in comics that have definitely changed over the years. Some of them good, some of them bad. I remember there was like a kind of like a funny kind of like mockumentary type movie starring Mark Hamill. I think it was just called Comic Book the Movie, where he was like
What
this
year?
like
What?
comic book
I'm
fan.
looking it up.
Yeah, yeah. I think it was like called like Comic Book the Movie or something like that, where he's like a comic book fan who's like a really big fan of like this like long lasting series of like this like a Captain America esque character, and they're giving it a movie, but they're giving it a movie that is like they completely like abandon the original roots and give it like this like updated makeover of like instead of like this like Robin esque character of like like father and son dynamic is like he's got like a really hot blonde like sidekick and like we need to talk to the creator. Well, the creator died years ago. Like, well, let's talk to his next of kin. Well, the next of kin has like nothing to do with this, and he didn't even know that his grandfather worked on this. So he's like willing to sign the rights away, and it was actually pretty interesting of like how he kind of gave like this like weird like fake example that is kind of grounded in reality because this is what comics do all the time. They change drastically over the years to kind of cater to a general audience rather than just sticking to what was originally written the first time.
So, Comic Book the movie came out 2004. Mark Hamill uh directed it, starred, directed and wrote it, and it did
Yep.
not do that well. It has a 39%
I
from
think I
audiences.
yeah, I think I saw that on uh Netflix like forever ago. I enjoyed it. It was pretty good.
Yeah. I mean, okay. I don't know. I never heard about this and I'm like, what?
I mean, it's not for everyone.
Yeah.
It is really funny. Like Tom Kenny is in it. The voice actor for SpongeBob is in it.
Oh.
So it has its moments, and there's like some pretty fun like random like pop culture and like nerdy cameos. It's been forever since I've seen it, but I felt like it was worth mentioning.
All right. I'm very like when you said he was in a mockumentary, I'm like, what? Like what? Like, that seems so left
I
field.
mean,
Yeah.
more or less. It's like a drama, like mockumentary type drama. It's like kind of like The Office, but like
Yeah.
a little bit more like gravity, I
Yeah.
guess. Even though it's like he's just arguing for the rights to like a comic book movie that you honestly, it's like if either version of this movie gets released, it
Yeah.
wouldn't really matter except for him.
Yeah. Okay.
Um,
I mean, obviously, if you have not seen Iron Man, go watch Iron Man. Yeah,
I
like,
mean, it came out forever ago. It came out in 2008. What are you doing not watching it?
um, they just officially announced the title for the next Spider-Man. So it's
Yes.
No Way Home.
Home.
Because a couple days before it was Phone Home, and then like, haha, just kidding. It's like, why bother give us the fake one? Why not just give us the real one and are people that, I mean, I get anxious, but
well, because Tom Holland's known for spoiling
Oh!
movies. It's like we're just gonna keep giving him fake titles.
Okay, well, did you see that? Did you see how it was him, like, and Zendaya, and I don't
I just watched it before we started recording.
and they're like, they won't tell us the name. I don't know why. Because you spoil things. No, I don't. Yes, you do. And they're just having an argument as they walk by a whiteboard that just says the name. It's like, but I guess it's gonna be set during Christmas, and everyone's like, oh, like Iron Man 3. And I'm really curious, because as long as it addresses that he's been outed, like, that's really all I care. That's what I care about the most, more than any of it. And I guess that's a multiverse movie, correct? Or is it not?
I have no idea.
Because I thought it was.
All I know is that I'm very anxious to see how WandaVision plays out and how this is going to tie into the Doctor Strange sequel.
When does that come out?
She's like, I don't remember specifically when. All I know is that this is tying directly into it, and Scarlet Witch plays is a very chief character in that movie.
Oh, okay. I don't know anything about it other than the name, and that's supposed to be kind of a horror, and I'm assuming it's coming out before Spider-Man. And I know Doctor Strange is in Spider-Man, which the whole idea, I don't know if it's confirmed. I think it's confirmed that it is dealing with the multiverse, and Doctor Strange is in the movie, but I keep hearing stuff and then hearing, no, it's not. Like, Tobey Maguire's in the movie, cool, and then a few weeks later heard, no, he's not. It's like, well, okay.
It's all speculation at this point, and honestly, we don't really have anything conclusive at this time, other than the title of the movie.
WandaVision, I was very, like, when I was here, I'm like, oh, cool. Like, I didn't really care all that much. I was kind of indifferent about Wanda and Vision. Nothing against them. I was just like, whatever. I sure. And then I started watching it, and I'm like, okay, like 3 minutes, like a minute, and I'm like, I love it. Also, can't this just be the show? Yeah. Like, there's nothing else going on. Like, can't this just be the show? I totally watched this. But after, I mean, we won't spoil it, but after the most recent episode, I'm now really confused on whether it is, because it was kind of implications of multiverse, and what we were told, I'm like, kind of contradicts that.
They're interested
a little, maybe.
I feel like this is gonna have to be a conversation outside of the stream of us recording.
But you know what I mean.
I don't think
then
so.
Never mind.
I was able to understand it pretty well, but I feel like I have knowledge that you don't. That makes that a little bit clearer.
All right. So on that note, I'm Samantha Tomlinson.
I'm Kevin Tracy, and we're going to be talking about WandaVision for the next hour outside of this recording. See you next time, folks.